Right, ladies and gents, this is the end of the forensic psychology topic. We've come to our final way of dealing with criminal behaviour, and that is restorative justice. Now, restorative justice in itself is not a particularly new idea, but it is a relatively new scheme in terms of the criminal justice system. And the whole point of it is that offenders and victims get to come face to face with each other. So the victim gets to come face to face with the offender and vice versa. And it's a really crucial stage for both the offender and the victim. So it's crucial for the offender in terms of their rehabilitation, but it's also crucial for the victim in terms of, can I actually come to terms with what's happened to me, and can I move on? Because very often, people get sent to prison, but the lasting effects on the victims go far beyond that. It doesn't just stop when you know that person has gone to prison. So this actually gives you the opportunity to work some of that stuff out with the offender. Now, the interesting thing with restorative justice is that the emphasis has been switched from being at a state level to being at an individual level. So what that means is that instead of us taking a prisoner and saying, right, the state or the country or whatever requires you to be punished, therefore we are going to punish you, it's switched to saying, right, what does the individual need? What does the victim need? What does the prisoner need in order to move on from this crime or from whatever has happened? The individual needs to come to terms with what's happened, and that need is placed above the needs of the state to punish the person who's committed the crime. So the victims are encouraged to take an active role in what's going on, and the offenders are also encouraged to take responsibility for what they did as well. Both of those things, can have a positive effect on both parties. And the process is actually a really simple one. You have an organised meeting with a trained mediator. The victim is given a chance to say how the event has actually affected them, and the offender is actually given the opportunity to see the consequences of his or her actions. The focus is very much on accepting responsibility and positive change for those who harmed others. The emphasis is much less on actual punishment. And these things are also not necessarily restricted to courtrooms either. So, survivors and offenders might choose to meet in a non-courtroom setting with other members of the community who may also have a role in what's going on. And it's very much an active process rather than just having passive involvement. So all parties get to say their bit. It's not just the victim that gets to say how it affected them. It's also the offender that gets to respond as well and say, maybe why they were doing it or what the circumstances were, so that dialogue kind of gets started. So everybody has to buy in, everybody has to be very active in their involvement, otherwise it won't work. But the focus is very much on positive outcomes for everybody who's involved. Positive outcomes for the victims because they can move on, but also positive outcomes for the offender so they can actually think about what they've done, and the hope is then that will make them less likely to reoffend, in the future. There are lots of different variations of the process. It doesn't have to be a sit-down talk face-to-face. It might also be that, the offender decides to make some kind of financial restitution to the victim. It could also be that, the process involves repairing some damage that's been done, so repairing a property, for example, if they've damaged a property. It's a very attractive alternative for prison particularly for younger criminals, and it could also, be added on to community service, for example. So instead of going to prison, you do community service plus some restorative justice as well, which is obviously much more attractive than going to prison. And also, it can go a long way to leading to a reduction in prison sentence for those people who have already been sentenced to a specific time in prison, or for those people, who do have to go to prison. Their sentence could be reduced if they decide to do a restorative justice part to it as well. Because it shows that you want to change. You shows that you're working on stuff that went wrong and that you're actively involved in a positive change for yourself. So it's a really simple little topic. That's the end of the outline already. Keeping it nice and short this time. On this slide here, I've just put 4 evaluation points. Now, I'm not going to go into detail for all of them. They're there, and you can use your respective books to find out more detail about them. I am going to go into detail into one, because one thing that a lot of people don't realise is if you can make one evaluation point, if it's a study, if you can use a study as an evaluation point and you can really flesh it out, then it means you don't have to use as many. So 2, maximum 3 evaluation points that include a study, if they're really, really good, then that's already enough for a top band essay. So I'm going to show you on this next slide what a really good evaluation point would look like, and I'm just going to highlight in red the bits that actually make it a really good evaluation point. Okay, so the first little bits are old news. So you've just got the introduction. You've got a recent study into the effectiveness of restorative justice provided some promising results. Sherman and Strang, that's supposed to say not strong. Sherman and Strang compared 36 studies of restorative justice with conventional justice, such as prison. Researchers found reductions in reoffending rates for violent and property crimes. Okay, nothing new there. Bog standard evaluation points at the minute. Now, this next bit is what shows an examiner that you've actually thought about why that could be, bearing in mind everything that you know about restorative justice. So, you could say it could be due to the fact that offenders will have come face to face with their victims and would have been confronted firsthand with the consequences of their crime. Alternatively, it's also possible that the offenders would have had to put any damage they caused right, which could also deter them from committing the crime again. So you've taken what they found in the research and you've actually applied it to the theory. That shows the examiner that you know your stuff. Moving on, you've got a little bit more from the study. For the victims, incidences of PTSD were also reduced. That's great. Why? So that could be down to being given the opportunity of confronting the offender and being able to voice feelings and thoughts associated with the event that may otherwise be avoided. Now again, you're taking just the normal results from the study, but you're actually applying it to the study, you're applying it to the topic, thereby showing the examiner what is going on and why it applies and why it's good, and also showing that you understand why this is an evaluation point. The final little bit as well, which a lot of people forget when they're writing these evaluation points, overall, the research shows that restorative justice can yield positive outcomes for all parties involved and should be considered as a viable option, both as an alternative to, but also alongside conventional justice. That last little bit links the entire thing back to what you're evaluating. So that is the link to the theory. Okay, so you've got your point, you've got your evidence, you've got explain. You've explained your evidence. That's the red bit, and then you've linked it back very nicely. So you've got your peel right there: point, evidence, explain, and link. If you can do that for 2 studies, in your evaluation section, then you're already on track for top band marks. You may already be in top band territory. To play it safe, you can throw a third evaluation point in there, something to do with how the evidence is mixed, or something to do with how it's actually quite expensive, or something like that, and you are on a roll for a top class essay. Okay, I hope that's been useful. Thank you.